2014, a farming district a few hours outside Dhaka, Bangladesh. Doctors keep pulling the same result off their blood tests over and over, and it makes no sense. Pregnant women, toddlers, little kids who have never left the village, every one of them carrying lead in their blood. Not trace amounts, the kind of lead that quietly strips points off a child's IQ and never gives them back. There is no smelter nearby, no lead paint on the walls, no old pipes. Nothing that is supposed to poison a human being is anywhere close to these families. And still, the numbers climb. It takes years to find the source. When they finally do, it is not a factory. It is a spice, the bright golden powder in nearly every kitchen across South Asia. The same powder sitting in a jar in your kitchen in the United States right now, the #1 selling herbal supplement in America, was being laced, on purpose, with an industrial paint pigment to make it look richer and sell faster. The people selling the world's healthiest spice were poisoning it, deliberately, to move product. This is where it begins. Go back 4,000 years, maybe more, to the wet, green lowlands of the Indian subcontinent, long before there was a Rome, a China anyone would recognize, or a written alphabet in most of the world. People there were already digging a knobby, unremarkable root out of the mud and building their entire lives around it. Turmeric is not a pretty plant to look at. What you want is underground, the rhizome, a gnarled, finger-shaped stem that grows sideways beneath the soil. Snap one open fresh and your hands are stained a violent orange-yellow within seconds, a color so aggressive it will not wash out of cotton, skin, or memory. It smells earthy and slightly bitter, a little like ginger, with the sweetness taken out. Taste it raw, and it is sharp, almost medicinal, with a warmth that sits at the back of your throat. And here is the first thing almost nobody knows about it. Turmeric does not grow from seed the way wheat or corn does. It is effectively sterile. Every turmeric plant on Earth is grown from a piece of another turmeric plant's root, cut and replanted by human hands. Which means, for 4,000 years, without a single break, somebody somewhere has been carrying this root forward, generation to generation, hand to hand. Stop that chain for one season, and it does not come back on its own. It is one of the longest unbroken relationships between a human being and a plant in the entire history of our species. To the people who first cultivated it, turmeric was never just a seasoning. It was medicine, smeared into open wounds to stop infection. It was dye, staining the robes of holy men, that deep saffron gold. It was ritual, rubbed onto the skin of brides before a wedding, scattered at temples, folded into ceremonies marking birth and death. In the medical tradition of Ayurveda, it was prescribed for everything from swelling to breathing problems to sluggish digestion. They called it a sacred spice. They meant it literally. And they were doing all of this while the ancestors of everyone watching this video were still thousands of years away from setting foot in North America. People were farming turmeric on purpose before the pyramids were finished. Turmeric had a problem, and it was the same problem that made a dozen other spices worth killing for. It only grows in hot, wet, tropical places. You cannot grow it in Ohio. You cannot grow it in France or England or anywhere with a real winter. For most of human history, if you were not living in a narrow band of the tropics, the only way to get turmeric was to buy it from someone who was, and pay whatever the distance demanded. So it moved. Slowly, along the same ancient arteries that carried silk and pepper and cinnamon. It reached China. It reached the Middle East and East Africa, carried in the packs of traders who understood they were hauling something valuable. By medieval times it had reached Europe, where merchants prized it as a cheaper stand-in for saffron, the same electric gold color at a fraction of the price. In an age when a bright dye could signal wealth and a strange root could pass for medicine, turmeric was worth carrying across distances that would exhaust a modern imagination. Picture loading a cart in southern India and not stopping until you had covered the distance from New York City to Los Angeles, then turning around and doing it again. That was the supply chain. Everywhere it landed, It did the same three jobs. It colored things, it flavored things, and it promised to heal things. That third promise is the one that matters, because thousands of years before a single clinical trial existed, turmeric had already built a reputation as a cure. A reputation passed down as unshakable truth, from healer to healer, mother to daughter, temple to temple. Hold on to that reputation, 4,000 years of it. Because in the 20th century, someone is going to take that ancient, trusted promise, wrap it in the language of modern science, and turn it into one of the most profitable stories in the wellness business. And almost none of it is going to hold up. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel covers the hidden histories behind the things that shaped the world. Real stories, real numbers, no filler. New video every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Whether you're in Texas, New York, or somewhere in between, I always want to know. Here is a number that should stop you. One country grows roughly 80% of all the turmeric on the planet. India. It has held that grip for centuries, and it has never let go. And it does it on a shockingly small footprint. Add up every turmeric field in India and you get an area of farmland that would fit, more or less, inside the state of Rhode Island. From that patch of ground comes 4 out of every 5 grams of turmeric consumed anywhere on Earth. It flows out through a network of traders, processors, and exporters that turns a muddy root into a global commodity worth billions. That is not an exaggeration. The global turmeric market runs somewhere north of $4 billion a year and is climbing toward $8 billion. And the single biggest buyer at the far end of that pipeline, the largest importer of turmeric in the world, is the United States. American demand for this spice roughly tripled in value in the span of a decade. We cannot grow it here, not at scale. So we buy it. Buy the container ship. Think about what that means. The thing you sprinkle into a curry or swallow in a capsule started in the mud of a farm in India, got processed in a mill you will never see, and traveled almost the entire width of the world to reach the shelf at your grocery store. Every link in that chain is a place where something can be added or hidden. Which brings us to the mill. Turning a raw turmeric root into the powder you buy is brutal, unglamorous work. The rhizomes are boiled, then dried in the sun for days, then polished, tumbled in drums until the rough skin comes off and the surface shines. Workers stand in clouds of yellow dust that coats their lungs, their clothes, their skin. It is hot, repetitive, low-paid labor, and it happens far from any camera. And somewhere along that chain, a shortcut appeared. Turmeric that gets waterlogged during a bad harvest turns dull and pale turmeric sells for less because buyers judge quality by color. So some processors reached for a fix. They started stirring a bright yellow industrial pigment into the powder to restore that rich golden glow. That pigment is lead chromate. It is the same family of compound used to paint the yellow lines down the middle of a highway. It is a known neurotoxin, and it works beautifully. A tiny scoop turns cheap, ruined turmeric into something that looks premium and commands a premium price. Researchers trace the practice back to at least the 1980s. Now picture the human cost, because it is not abstract. In the mills, the workers doing the mixing carry elevated lead in their own blood. Downstream, in millions of homes, the people eating that spice every single day, especially small children, whose developing brains soak up lead like a sponge, absorb it a meal at a time. Lead does not announce itself. It does not cause a fever. It just quietly damages a child's brain permanently, and by the time anyone measures it, the harm is done. In Bangladesh alone, before the problem was tackled, researchers estimated lead poisoning was costing the country billions of dollars a year in lost human potential. When scientists finally sampled turmeric across South Asia, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, the countries that grow most of the world's supply, they found lead in a significant share of it. In some markets, in cities like Patna and Karachi, the levels were so high they projected child blood lead concentrations up to 10 times the threshold that triggers medical concern in the United States. Quick question before we go on. How much turmeric do you think the average American swallows in a year, once you count the spice rack and the supplement bottle? Drop your guess in the comments. The real answer, and where it's hiding, is coming. Because this is the part where America stops being a bystander. For most of American history, turmeric was an afterthought. A spice most people couldn't pick out of a lineup, used mainly to make cheap mustard yellow. Then, sometime around 2010, that changed almost overnight. Turmeric got rebranded. Not as a spice, as a superfood. Golden lattes started showing up on cafe menus. Wellness influencers held up glowing orange drinks. Health food shelves filled with turmeric this and curcumin that. Each bottle promising to fight inflammation, ease joint pain, sharpen memory, maybe even hold off cancer. American supplement companies raced to engineer high-absorption versions and patented extracts. Turmeric became, and remains, the #1 selling herbal supplement in the United States. Look at the money. US. Sales of turmeric supplements climbed from around $25 million in 2013 to over $150 million by 2021. Roughly a six-fold jump in 8 years. An ancient root that Americans ignored for 2 centuries suddenly could not stay on the shelf. And the whole boom rested on a single promise. The same promise those ancient healers made 4,000 years ago. Turmeric heals. Curcumin, the compound that gives it that gold color, is a miracle molecule. That was the pitch. That was the entire foundation. The world believed the hard part was over, that science had finally caught up to ancient wisdom and confirmed what India had known all along. A natural cure, validated at last. It hadn't. What I haven't told you yet is what the people selling you turmeric already knew, and in some cases already had reason to doubt, even as they cashed the checks. Let's talk about the science everyone assumed was rock solid. Start with the molecule itself. Curcumin makes up only a small fraction of turmeric, a few percent by weight. And chemically, it is a nightmare of a drug candidate. When researchers who specialize in medicinal chemistry took a hard look, they landed on a brutal conclusion. Curcumin belongs to a category of compounds nicknamed pains, panacea interference compounds. In plain English, molecules that light up in laboratory tests and look like they're doing something, when really they're just tricking the test. Curcumin is famous for producing false positives. It looks like a cure in a petri dish precisely because it fools the equipment. It gets worse. Curcumin is unstable. It breaks down fast, and your body barely absorbs it. The measured oral bioavailability is under 1%, meaning for every 100 milligrams you swallow, less than 1 milligram actually makes it into your bloodstream. In studies where people took massive doses, up to 12 grams a day, scientists often could not even detect the compound in their blood. It went in one end and out the other. And the trials? More than 120 clinical trials have tested curcumin against all kinds of diseases. The number of rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials that clearly succeeded? 0. None. Not one has definitively shown curcumin works the way the bottles imply. So how did a molecule that barely enters your body and has never won a clean trial become a billion-dollar miracle? Follow the research, and it leads to Houston, Texas. For decades, the most influential curcumin researcher on the planet worked at one of America's most respected institutions, the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. He published more than 120 papers, making the case that curcumin could fight cancer, Alzheimer's, and a long list of other diseases. His work was cited thousands of times. It became the scientific bedrock under the entire turmeric fights cancer movement. He even recommended, in a popular book, that people take a daily curcumin supplement. Then, in 2012, it started to unravel. Federal research integrity authorities and anonymous data sleuths flagged image manipulation in as many as 65 of his published papers. Duplicated pictures, spliced results, the kind of thing that means the data can't be trusted. MD Anderson launched a fraud investigation. He retired in 2015, and roughly 30 of his papers were retracted, making him one of the most retracted scientists in the world. Sit with that. A huge share of the science that convinced America turmeric was a cancer-fighting miracle came from a body of work riddled with fraud. The foundation was rotten, and by the time anyone said so out loud, the miracle was already a global industry with its own momentum. But manufacturing a miracle out of thin research wasn't even the most brazen move. Because a few years before all that, two researchers had tried to do something almost unbelievable. They tried to own it. In 1995, the US Patent and Trademark Office granted patent number 504 to two researchers at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. The patent covered the use of turmeric to heal wounds.
Do not worry, child.
Read that again. In 1995, an American institution was granted the exclusive legal right to the idea of using turmeric on a wound, a use that every grandmother in India had known and practiced for literally thousands of years. A 4,000-year-old folk remedy, sacred to hundreds of millions of people, suddenly had an owner. And the owner was in Mississippi. India did not take it quietly. The country's Council of Scientific and Industrial Research went to war over it. Their lawyers dug up 32 separate references, proving turmeric's wound-healing use was ancient public knowledge, including a paper from 1953 and passages from texts written in Sanskrit centuries earlier. They marched that evidence into the US patent system and demanded a re-examination, and they won. In 1997, the Patent Office threw out every single claim. The patent was revoked. It became a landmark, the first time a developing country had successfully beaten back a patent on its own traditional knowledge inside the American system. India was so rattled by how close it came that it built an entire digital library of its ancient medical texts, translated into multiple languages, just to stop the next company from trying to patent something its people had used since before recorded history. Think about the pattern forming here. Take an ancient, trusted, freely shared remedy, wrap it in a lab coat or a legal filing, and convert 4,000 years of shared human knowledge into a private, profitable product. There was one more decision that made the whole modern machine possible. And it happened not in a lab or a patent office, but in the United States Congress. In 1994, lawmakers passed a law that carved out dietary supplements as a special category, one where products do not need to be proven safe or effective before they hit store shelves. The Food and Drug Administration cannot vet them the way it vets a drug. A company can put a supplement on the market, and the FDA generally only steps in after something goes wrong. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. That single law is why today, more than 80,000 supplement products can be sold in America with almost no gatekeeper, including high-dose curcumin capsules that no rigorous trial supports, made from a spice that might be laced with lead, sold on health claims built partly on retracted research. This is the part that should make you angry. Here is what that hands-off system actually produced on American soil. First, the poison got through. Lead-contaminated turmeric didn't stay overseas. US health departments have traced lead poisoning cases, including in young children, back to imported turmeric. And the FDA has had to pull contaminated turmeric products off American shelves. The neurotoxin that damaged kids in rural Bangladesh has turned up in jars in American pantries, hitting hardest in immigrant families who use the most of it and trust it the most. Second, the cure started sending Americans to the hospital. As turmeric supplements exploded in popularity, doctors began seeing something they'd almost never seen before: liver injury caused by turmeric. To get around curcumin's terrible absorption, manufacturers started adding black pepper extract, or piperine, which can boost the amount that enters your bloodstream by up to 2,000%, 20-fold. Suddenly, a compound your body used to flush harmlessly was flooding in at doses nobody had ever tested for safety. And in vulnerable people, occasionally, the liver couldn't handle it. The tracking network that monitors this kind of thing found the share of serious liver injury cases caused by herbal and dietary supplements roughly tripled, from around 7% to 20% over about a decade. Turmeric now sits near the top of that list. Some cases were mild. A few were severe enough to threaten a life. And how many Americans are exposed? Researchers estimate that more than 11 million US adults regularly take turmeric supplements. 11 million. That is more people than live in New York City and Chicago combined, swallowing daily doses of a barely absorbable compound, sold on a promise no clean trial has ever kept, from an industry the government doesn't check before it sells. None of this was hidden by some grand conspiracy. It was worse than that in a way. It was allowed. The science that inflated the miracle was retracted in plain sight. The chemistry that debunked it was published in a major journal for anyone to read. The lead was documented by Stanford researchers and printed in the news. The liver cases were logged in medical databases. The patent grab played out in public. The information was all right there. The system just wasn't built to stop any of it before it reached you. The people selling America its favorite golden supplement had every reason to know the foundation was cracked, and the register kept ringing. So where does turmeric live in your life right now? Everywhere. And you probably haven't noticed, it's the #1 herbal supplement in the country, a market that has grown into the hundreds of millions of dollars a year on its own. Walk into a Walmart, a Costco, a Target, a CVS, a Whole Foods. It's on the shelf in a dozen forms: capsules, gummies, powders, teas, golden milk mixes. It's the glow in the turmeric latte at the cafe down the street. It's the color in your yellow mustard, and the warmth in every curry, and the tint in more processed foods than you'd guess, because it's one of the most common natural food dyes on Earth. It is in your spice rack. It is very likely in your medicine cabinet, in a bottle you bought because someone, somewhere, told you it fights inflammation. And whatever is in that bottle came from a root grown in the mud half a world away, processed in a mill you'll never see, in a supply chain nobody fully guarantees. Slow down for a second here. Turmeric is not evil, let's be clear. As a spice, in your food, it's fine. Probably even good for you in the ordinary way that colourful whole foods are good for you. The tragedy isn't the root. The tragedy is what we did to the story of the root. Because the full arc tells you something uncomfortable about how the modern world actually works. Human beings spent 4,000 years quietly perfecting a relationship with a humble plant, carrying it forward by hand, treating it as sacred, sharing its uses freely across every border it crossed. And in the span of a single generation, we took that inheritance, dressed it up in the language of science and law and wellness, and turned it into a product, one propped up by retracted studies, sold through a system that doesn't check its work, and sometimes literally poisoned to make it look more pure. Nobody had to bury a miracle to make money off turmeric. That's the twist. They just had to build one, and sell you the feeling that you discovered a secret the establishment didn't want you to have. The "they don't want you to know" story wasn't the thing being suppressed. It was the marketing. So, here's the question worth sitting with. How many of the things you reach for to feel healthy, the supplement, the superfood, the ancient remedy in a modern bottle, are backed by what you assume is backing them? And how many are just a very old promise wearing a very new label? Have you ever bought something because it was natural and figured that meant it was safe? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the real history behind the things that run your life, subscribe. Hit the like button. It tells me to keep going deeper. And share this with someone who's got a bottle of turmeric in their cabinet right now, because they should hear it too. The next time you stir that gold powder into a pan, or twist the cap off that supplement bottle in your kitchen, remember what it actually is: a 4,000-year-old gift carried by hand across the entire history of our species, and handed to you with the one thing those ancient healers never added and the modern sellers never mention: whatever ended up in the jar when nobody was checking.